Welcome back, Highlanders, to Chapter 3 entitled Supply, Demand, and the Market Process. Once again, if you've had Econ 3 before, then this should be a review for you. If you haven't had Econ 3 yet, don't worry about it. We are going to go through it step by step as if nobody's had it to make sure that everybody's kind of starting off on the same page here. All right, so with that in mind, in Chapter 3, we're going to be going over the law of demand. And that includes the demand curve and shifters of demand. And then we'll be talking about the law of supply and how that relates to the supply curve and shifters of supply. Once we have a good understanding of demand and supply, we're going to put those together in what we call a market equilibrium. We'll talk about why that market equilibrium is efficient and that there's no excess supply or demand. We'll also talk about what happens when we shift those supply and demand curves in market equilibrium. We'll start out shifting one at a time, and then we will shift both supply and demand at the same time and talk about how to work through those kinds of problems. And then finally, we'll conclude the chapter by talking about the invisible hand principle, which is kind of an interesting philosophical concept that correlates to how markets work and reach this equilibrium. So that's the overview for this chapter. Without further ado, let's go ahead and get into it and talk about the demand curve. So the law of demand says that there is an inverse or negative relationship between the price of a good and the quantity that buyers are willing to purchase. And when we talk about an inverse or negative relationship, all we're saying there is that when the price of a good goes up, people tend to buy less, right? Or the way this works is that at a higher price, quantity demanded, which is the amount that people are willing to buy, will go down. At the same time, if we had a lower price, well, at lower prices, we tend to be more likely to buy something. So the quantity demanded, or the amount that people are willing to buy, will go up. So we talk about an inverse or negative relationship. We just mean that when one goes up, the other goes down, and when one goes down, the other goes up. We tend to buy less at higher prices. We tend to want to buy more at lower prices. Any inverse or negative relationship results in a downward sloping curve. So again, anything where when one goes up, the other goes down is going to result in a downward sloping curve. With that in mind, let's give a quick example of how inverse relationships work and then how it applies to the law of demand. Once again, I'm going to exit the full screen mode here so that I can draw with different colors. So let's just go and talk about a graph that represents any regular inverse or negative relationship. So again, we're going to have a vertical axis and we're going to have a horizontal axis, right? So on the vertical axis, we're going to measure something that could affect maybe your GPA. This might be like your blood alcohol level. How much you've been day drinking during this quarantine relative to your GPA. Now, as you might expect, this is going to have this is likely to have an inverse or negative relationship. For example, if you're drinking all day when you're supposed to be watching lecture videos, that you're walking around with, say, a 0.20 blood alcohol level, then you're probably going to also have a 0.0 GPA. Now, if you're only drinking a little bit less, that you're walking around with maybe a 0.15 blood alcohol level, then you might be able to get enough studying done in order to get, say, a 1.0 GPA. Might be able to make some D's in some classes. Now, if you're drinking a little bit less, that you're walking around with, say, a 0.10 blood alcohol level, then you might be able to get enough studying done to pull off that 2.0 GPA. Get C's in most of your classes. And if you're only drinking enough so that you can walk around with a 0.05 blood alcohol level, well, that's below the legal limit. You can certainly get some studying done and probably get B's in most of your classes. And if you're spending no time drinking, so that you have a 0.00 blood alcohol level, and you're spending all that time studying instead, then you could have a, say, 4.0 GPA, right? Well, anyways, connect these dots like you learned how to do back in your preschool or kindergarten classes. And what you have is a downward sloping curve. Downward sloping in that we read curves from left to right, or we read graphs from left to right in this country. So if you were running along this graph from left to right, it's like you are running downhill. So again, that's what I mean when we talk about an inverse or negative relationship. Now, if we were to change the story here about what this graph represents, and we change this blood alcohol level to price, so this would be like 20 cents, 15 cents, 10 cents, and maybe 5 cents, and we change this GPA to the quantity that we were willing to buy at these different prices. So at 20 cents, we might not be willing to buy any, but at 15 cents, you might buy one. At 10 cents, you might buy two. At 5 cents, you might buy three. If they're just to give them away to you for free, you might take 4 of them, right? Then what we have here is a downward sloping demand curve representing that relationship between price and quantity demanded, right? So again, when we talk about the law of demand, it's an inverse relationship between price and quantity demanded, right? Again, any inverse relationship is going to be a downward sloping curve. So moving forward here, let's go ahead and derive ourselves a demand curve. And to be timely, let's just say we're talking about the demand for toilet paper. So I'm going to give you a chart here. This chart represents the price and the quantity demanded at that particular price. So for example, if we are talking about the price of toilet paper being $5, then you will buy 10 packages of toilet paper. If the price of toilet paper is $4, then our economy out there will buy 20 packages of toilet paper. If the price is $3, then everyone out there will buy 30 packages. If the price is $2, then everyone out there will buy 40 packages. So with that in mind, let's go ahead and draw out this demand curve. Oop. I meant to do that in black. There we go. So again, we're going to have a vertical axis and a horizontal axis. On the vertical axis, we always put the P for price. On the horizontal axis, we always put a Q for quantity, right? So again, if we are talking about a price of $5, at that price of $5, we might have a total of 10 packages of toilet paper being bought at that price. Now, as you can imagine, if the price were to go down to $4, people might be more eager to go out there and buy that toilet paper. So much so that at a price of $4, you'll have people out there willing to buy 20 packages. If the price of toilet paper were $3 a package, then again, you have people more willing and eager to stock up on toilet paper, so much so that 30 packages might be bought and sold. And then if the price of toilet paper were down to $2 a package, then you know, particularly in this trying time, that people are going to load up, get as much toilet paper as they can, to the point where you might have 40 packages being bought, right? And so again, connect these dots, and you're going to see this downward sloping curve, or this inverse relationship between the price and quantity demanded for toilet paper, right? So that represents all the toilet paper that people are willing to buy at these various prices. Again, I want you to very carefully notice that at higher prices, people are willing to buy less, and at lower prices, people are wanting to buy more. So a lot of economists say one solution to the whole idea of people hoarding toilet paper and buying more than they need is to actually just allow the price of toilet paper to go up. Again, at higher prices, people probably won't overbuy as much as they would at, say, lower prices. So again, the big lesson here behind the law of demand is that as price increases, we say that quantity demanded, not demand, but quantity demanded decreases. And as price decreases, we'd say that quantity demanded increases. So with that in mind, let's talk about the difference between using this language saying that demand changes versus quantity demanded changes. Now, this is one of those things I want you to pay very close attention to, because this is one of those things that's kind of missed a lot in intro to economics classes. Students have a hard time distinguishing between a change in demand versus a change in quantity demanded. I think mostly because the language being used is so similar. But a change in quantity demanded is a movement along the demand curve. So you go from one point on the demand curve to a different point on the very same demand curve. And that's caused by a change in one thing and one thing only, and that is a change in the current price of that good, right? So if it's the current price of the good that's changing, right, then we call that a change in quantity demanded. If it's a change in anything else that affects our desire to have it, then we'll call that a change in demand, which is what we'll talk about next. So if we're talking about an increase in quantity demanded, that is a movement down the curve, or you're moving to the right along that very same demand curve. Again, we read graphs from left to right, so all increases are movements or shifts to the right. all decreases are going to be movements or shifts to the left. So if it is a decrease in quantity demanded, that is a movement up the curve or to the left. So if we say that quantity demanded is going down, right, that happens because the price of the good has gone up, and that's us moving up or to the left along that very same demand curve. So let's go ahead and make sure that we understand this by drawing another graph. Once again, I'm going to escape the full screen mode so that we can use the different colors and make sure that this graph is appearing like we want it to. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and draw a graph with a vertical axis and a horizontal axis. Once again, we're going to put a P up on the vertical axis. That's going to represent the price of the good. We're going to put a Q down here. That's going to represent the quantity, and in this case, the quantity demanded for the particular good at these different prices. So we could have a demand curve that's going to look something like this. Oop, what happened there? We'll call this D1, representing our first demand curve that we're going to look at here. Right? So let's say that this is the demand for a good like, I don't know, we'll call it pickles. Right. So at a price of $2 per pickle, you might have people willing to buy, say, maybe 4 pickles at this particular price. But if the price were to go down to, say, $1 a pickle, again, we know from the law of demand that at lower prices, our quantity demanded is higher, or people are going to be willing to buy more. We'll say that is 8 pickles at that particular price. So we'll call this point A, and we'll call this point B. Right. So if you walk into a restaurant and they're selling pickles as sides to their sandwiches, and they're selling them at $2 a pickle, you might choose to buy 4 pickles. If they're selling those pickles as sides to their sandwiches at a price of $1 per pickle, you might be willing to buy, say, 8 pickles at that price. Right. So again, let's say you walk into the store and they're saying, hey, here comes a special for the next hour, an hour only. It's going to be $1 per pickle versus $2 per pickles. Well, as you going from point A on this curve to point B on this curve, right? If you're going from A to B, so again, you're going from a point higher on the curve to a point lower on the curve. That's what we call an increase, not in demand, but in quantity demanded, which I'll abbreviate as Q subscript D here. Right? All that means is that you're going to be buying more pickles because the price is lower. Now, if that special ends and the price of pickles goes back up to $2 a pickle, right? Well, that's you going from point B on this curve. Ooh, didn't mean to do that. It's supposed to be in red. Hopefully, we'll make that work. So that's you going from point B on this curve to point A on this curve, right? That is a decrease. Again, not in demand, but in quantity demanded. You are buying fewer pickles now because the price of pickles has gone up. So ask yourself, why am I buying more or why am I buying less? If you're buying more because the price of the good itself has gone down, right, that is an increase in quantity demanded. Or if you're buying less because the current price itself has gone up, right, then that is a decrease in quantity demanded. Right, so be very careful, please. I beg you, please do not confuse this with a change in demand. And a change in demand is a shift of the curve. So it's the entire demand curve picking up and shifting either to the right or to the left. And this is caused by a change in anything that affects your desire to buy something other than the current price of the good. So anything that happens that causes you to want something more or less at the same prices, meaning that the price of the good itself hasn't changed, right? Well, that's something that will actually shift the demand curve rather than cause you to move to a different point on the very same demand curve. So an increase in demand is going to cause the curve to shift right. Again, we read graphs from left to right. So all increases are movements or shifts to the right. A decrease in demand means that curve is going to pick up and shift to the left. So let's talk about some examples of what will shift this curve as well as what that's going to look like on this particular graph. So let's go back to our graph that we were looking at earlier. Right. Let's say that it's not just any old day, but it's a day in which you are actually enrolled in a pickle eating contest. In order to win the contest, you have to eat the most pickles, right? That means you might be more eager to buy pickles at all these same prices, right? So that's going to cause your demand curve to pick up and shift to the right, looking something like this. We'll call this D2. So what this is saying is that the same price of $2, now that you're in a pickle eating contest, you might be willing to buy 8 pickles at that price instead of 4. And at that same price of $4, at that same price of $1, you might be willing to buy, say, 12 pickles instead of 8, right? So this pickup and shifting from D1 to D2 means that you're willing to buy more pickles at $2 than you were before, and more pickles at $1 than you were before. You're willing to buy more pickles at all the same prices than you were before. So this shift from D1 to D2 represents the fact that your desire for pickles at all the same prices has increased. So we call this an increase, not in quantity demanded, even though you're buying more, and that's where students get confused, but we call it an increase in demand. So again, if you're in a pickle eating contest, right, you're going to want to buy more pickles at those same prices. That's going to cause that curve to pick up and shift to the right. Right. Now, let's say that something happens that reduces your desire to buy pickles at all these same prices. Let's say, for example, that it is the day after a pickle eating contest, and because you ate so many pickles the day before, you're not as eager to buy pickles now as you were before at these same pickle prices. Right? So that's going to cause your demand curve to shift to the left. Maybe looking something like this here. So we're going to call this D3. Right. So what this says is that at the same price of $2, instead of buying, say, 4 pickles like you would on any regular day, or 8 pickles like you would on the day of a pickle eating contest, right? The day after the pickle eating contest, at a price of $2, you might just buy 1 pickle, right? Because you're so tired of eating pickles from the day before. And even at a price of $1, which is a pretty good deal for pickles, you might only be willing to buy, say, 3 pickles at that price rather than 8 like you would on any regular day, or 12 like you would on the day of a pickle eating contest, right? So this movement from D1 to D3, this is a decrease. Again, not in quantity demanded, even though you're buying less. It's a decrease in demand because this represents the fact that your desire to buy pickles at all the same prices has gone down, right? So again, that happens anytime you have a shift to the left of your demand curve. That is what represents a decrease in demand. So again, the big question when you're trying to figure out whether it's a change in quantity demanded or a change in demand is ask yourself again, why am I buying more? Am I buying more because the price has gone down? If that's the case, that is an increase in quantity demanded, not demand. That's represented by a movement along this demand curve, right, towards a point lower on that curve. But if you're buying more, even if the price of the good itself hasn't changed because you just want it more at that same price, then that's what we call an increase in demand, right? So again, ask yourself, why am I buying more or why am I buying less? Is it because the price of the good has changed? That's a change in quantity demanded. Or is it because something else has changed that's caused me to want it more or less, right? That is a change in demand, right? So again, make sure you kind of understand the difference between a change in quantity demanded and a change in demand. Now, to give you an idea that this example was not necessarily just completely fabricated, it's actually based on true events. Me and my friend Nathan actually got into a pickle eating contest to promote a boxing match that we were hosting as owners of a boxing gym, right? So this is me right here getting ready to engage in this pickle eating contest. This is my friend Nathan who still lives down in Florida, right? We are about to eat all the pickles in that particular bucket. He actually ate them all first and then ate 2 more on top of it, so he won the contest. Having eaten all those pickles, I had plenty and didn't want any more pickles after that. And certainly wasn't going to be willing to pay as much for pickles the next day. So I bought a lot more pickles than I normally would on that day, right? But again, didn't really buy any pickles the next day, no matter what the prices were, because I was so sick from eating all those pickles the day before. So here's a quick practice question to see if we understand what's going on here. So which of the following will result from a decrease in the price of a good? Is it A, an increase in demand? Is it B, a decrease in demand? Is it C, an increase in quantity demanded? Or D, a decrease in quantity demanded? So I'll give you a second if you want to pause the computer or the video just so that you can take some time to answer this question. So go ahead and pause it now. And we're back if you want to continue on here. So again, what's the following result in would result from a decrease in the price of a good? Well, if it's the current price of the good itself that's going down, right, that means that you're going to be buying more, so that's an increase in quantity demanded. So C would be the answer you'd be looking for there. Right, again, a change in quantity demanded is caused by a change in the price of the good itself, and if it's a decrease in the price of the good itself, that would be an increase in quantity demanded. So we know what changes quantity demanded, that is a change in the price of the good. Now the real question is, well, what's going to shift demand? What's going to cause that demand curve to shift to the left or the right? What are those changes in demand? So let's go through a list of shifters of demand, starting with the first thing in our list, and that is a change in consumer income. As you might imagine, having more or less money could affect how much you buy of something, even if the price of that thing doesn't change. Right, now, when it comes to a change in consumer income, there's two types of goods that we're going to talk about. The first is what we call a normal good. And a normal good is something that you like to buy and will buy more of if you have more money. So the way this works is if your income goes up, then your demand for normal goods, so I'll just abbreviate as that D subscript normal, that will also go up, meaning that will shift your demand curve to the right. And this should make sense because, again, these normal goods are goods that you like to buy and would buy more of if you have more money. So these normal goods might include things like steak and lobster, or it might include things like nice cars or designer clothes, right? Again, stuff that if you had more money, you would buy more of. So I'll tell you a quick normal goods story back from when I was in graduate school. So for those of you who don't know, if you're working on, say, a PhD or master's degree, you might end up getting what's called a fellowship, in which case you'll work as a teaching assistant or research assistant for the university in exchange for them paying a lot of your student fees and giving you a small living stipend. A small living stipend for me when I was a graduate student was about $11,000 a year, so that's what I had to live off of. Right, so with that in mind, I ate a lot of things that I only ate just because they were cheap and I didn't have a lot of money. One thing that I always really liked was shrimp, and I just never was able to buy it as a graduate student because it was always relatively too expensive. So when I was, so a lot of times as a graduate student, you get asked, like when you stop being a graduate student, when you actually get your PhD and get your first real job with your first real paycheck, right? What are you going to buy? And that's kind of how you get through these impoverished times as a graduate student, is you fantasize about what you're going to buy when you're actually a professor with a PhD and your income increases like sixfold or 6 times what it was before. And so a lot of people talk about how they're going to buy a new car and start making payments on it, right? Or they're going to get some nice clothes or some jewelry or whatever. But my big luxury good that I really wanted to buy was those big shrimp wheels that you see in the stores. So if you go into like the frozen food section of a store, you'll see a shrimp wheel with like 40 or 60 shrimp in there and some sauce in the middle. I always wanted to get those, but it was too expensive for me as a graduate student. So my professor asked me what I was going to do with my first real paycheck. I told him I'm probably going to get one of those big shrimp wheels at the store, one of those wheels that contain about 60 shrimp. I'm just going to eat shrimp all day long. And sure enough, when I got my first job at Florida State University out of grad school, my professor called me and asked me what I was doing. And I told him I'm doing exactly what I told you I was going to be doing. I bought one of those big shrimp wheels. I'm about 42 shrimp deep. I'm going to finish the rest of the shrimp here before this phone call is over. So shrimp represented a normal good for me. When my income went up, my demand for those shrimp went up as well. Now, if my income were to go down, then I wouldn't be able to buy as much shrimp as I can now, and so my demand for shrimp would decrease with it. So the other type of good that we're going to talk about are inferior goods. And inferior goods are goods that you don't like so much, but you only buy them because they're cheap and you're poor, right? So the way it works is that if your income goes up, so that you have more money, then your demand for these inferior goods, you know, just abbreviate D subscript inferior, that goes down because you're not going to buy these goods anymore without you have money. You're going to buy your normal goods instead. So again, when I was in graduate school, one of the meals that I would eat, because I couldn't afford the shrimp as much, is what I used to call ghetto spaghetti, which is basically ramen noodles with cut up bologna on top, and then you pour ketchup over it. That kind of represents the spaghetti sauce. I know that sounds nasty, and it was kind of nasty, but it was really cheap, right? Ramen noodles are cheap, bologna's cheap, ketchup's cheap, is something I can afford to eat as a graduate student making that graduate stipend. Right. So when again I graduated and got that job at Florida State University and started buying shrimp, I stopped eating ghetto spaghetti and I haven't had ghetto spaghetti ever since. So as my income has gone up, my demand for these inferior goods like ramen noodles and bologna have gone down. Now, if I were to lose my job and go back to making what I made in graduate school, then I have to start eating ghetto spaghetti again. So if my income were to go down, then my demand for those inferior goods would go up or increase. Right. So again, when it comes to a change in consumer income, there's two types of goods. There's normal goods, right? Again, the goods you like to buy and will buy more of if you have more money. Again, those might be nice cars or nice clothes, fancy jewelry, stuff like that. Again, dinner's out. That includes steak, lobster, or whatever you like to eat. And then there's goods where when your income goes up, you'll buy less of them. And that includes inferior goods, like again, your ramen noodles, your bologna, used underwear, or crappy cars that are about to fall apart. Right? These are all things that you don't necessarily like to buy, but you only buy based off of your current financial circumstances. If those circumstances were to improve, you'd buy less of them and buy the normal goods instead. So hopefully that makes sense. Let's go ahead and move on to number 2, which I think is even easier to understand, and that is a change in the number of consumers. So the way this one works is that the number of consumers in an area goes up, then there's more people out there to buy stuff. Naturally, the demand for that stuff will increase. So this symbol used to mean number. I know now it kind of means hashtag, but we're going back to the old days where it does mean number. So let's say the number of consumers goes up. Then again, that means that the demand for the items in question will also go up. And it works in the opposite direction as well, in the sense that if the number of consumers were to go down, then demand would go down as well. So the social distancing thing has caused the number of consumers to go way down because people aren't really out there trying to buy stuff in stores anymore. They might still be buying stuff online, but you have a lot fewer people out there walking the streets in front of storefronts. And so as you can imagine, the demand for items will be lower during the social distancing time. So I've got 2 pictures here. Both of them are of downtown Boston. One is before the social distancing thing happened. The other is after this whole social distancing thing has come about. And as you can see, the number of consumers has gone way down now that the social distancing measures are implemented. And of course, that's going to cause the demand for most things to go down as a result. So again, when we're talking about a change in the number of consumers, that is going to affect demand. If the number of consumers goes up, demand goes up. If the number of consumers goes down, demand goes down. Now, another item or another shifter of demand could be a change in the price of a related good. And this is where it starts to get confusing for a lot of students. So if it is a change in the current price of the good in question, that is not a shifter of demand. That is a change in quantity demanded. You're going to move along the very same curve. But if it's a change in the price of a related good, right, then that's something that's going to shift the demand curve either to the right or to the left. So what do I mean by a related good? Well, there are 2 types of related goods. One is called substitutes. And substitutes are goods that are used in place of one another, meaning you can either consume one or the other, right? So for dinner tonight, you might eat either beef or chicken. You're probably not going to eat both, right? So with that in mind, if the price of beef goes up, that means that you're going to buy less beef. That is a reduction in the quantity demanded for beef. But because you're buying less beef and you either got to eat beef or chicken, then your demand for chicken is going to increase in that you're going to buy more chicken even if the price of chicken hasn't changed. So the way it works is if the price of a substitute goes up, then the demand for the good in question will also go up, right? So if beef and chicken are substitutes and the price of beef goes up, then the demand for chicken will increase because you got to eat something. And if you're not buying as much beef because those beef are being sold at higher prices, then you're going to eat the chicken instead. Of course, it works in the opposite direction as well. If the price of beef were to go down, or then you buy more beef, that's an increase in the quantity demanded for beef, right? But that's going to cause the demand for chicken to go down because you're not going to buy as much chicken even if the price of chicken hasn't changed because you're going to be eating all this beef instead. So again, when the price of a substitute goes up, demand goes up. If the price of a substitute goes down, then demand for the good in question will go down. And then the other type of good is complements. And complements are goods that are used together, like peanut butter and jelly or milk and cereal. And as you can imagine, if the price of peanut butter goes up so that people buy less peanut butter, again, that's a reduction in the quantity demanded for peanut butter, then it's also going to cause people to want less jelly, even if the price of jelly hasn't changed, simply because it's not as fun to eat jelly without peanut butter. Right, so the way this works is if the price of a complement goes up, then the demand for the good in question will go down. Again, think of, say, milk and cereal. If the price of milk goes up so that people buy less milk, well, then they're going to want to buy less cereal, even if the price of cereal hasn't changed, because it's not as fun to eat cereal without milk. Again, it works in the opposite direction as well. If the price of a complement goes down, then the demand for the good in question will go up. So, for example, if the price of milk were to go down, people might buy more milk. If people are going to buy more milk, well, then they're also going to want more cereal, even if the price of cereal hasn't changed. Right? So if the price of a complement goes down, the demand for the good in question goes up. Right? So again, make sure you understand how substitutes and complements are affected when these prices change. Moving on to our fourth shifter of demand, that is a change in expectations. So the first expectation we're going to talk about is an expected change in price. And again, this can be confusing for students because I told you when it's the current price of the good itself that's changing, that is a change in quantity demanded or a movement along the curve, not a change in demand or a shift of the curve. But if it's the expected price or what we think is going to happen to the price in the future that's changing, right, well, then that will actually cause the curve to shift, or we're going to move to a whole different curve rather than move to a different point on the same curve. So the way this works with expected change in price is, again, we're not talking about the current price, but what you expect to happen to the price in the future. So if you expect the future price of a good to go up, then the current demand for that good will also go up. So if you expect the price in the future to be a lot higher, then basically that means that you're going to want to buy a lot more today, even if the current price hasn't changed, right? So think of, say, gasoline. If you found out that the price of a gallon of gasoline was going to double tomorrow, maybe go from $4 today to $8 tomorrow, then you probably fill up your tank today. So if you expect the future price to go up, you're going to buy more now. And again, it works in the opposite direction. If you expect a future price to go down, like you expect something to go on sale, well, you're not going to buy it today. You're going to wait until it goes on sale. In fact, if you've ever said, hey, I'm just going to wait till it goes on sale before I buy it, then you already understand this idea. So again, if you expect the future price to go down, then your current demand will go down. You won't buy it now. You'll wait till it goes on sale before you buy it. And the other expectation that could change is a change in income. Right, so again, if you expect your future income to change, then that's going to affect how much you want to buy now. So if we're talking about something like normal goods, right, if you expect your future income to go up, then you're actually going to want to buy more now because you know you're going to have the money to pay it off. So think of it this way. Imagine you win the lottery and you know you've got $100 million coming your way after taxes. That's going to be your lump sum payout, but it's going to take 2 weeks for that money to get there. Are you going to wait 2 weeks before you start racking up money on your credit card? Most people say no, we're going to start making it rain immediately. So the way this one works is if your, again, future income, which I'm just going to abbreviate as I subscript future, if you know your future income is going to increase, well then once again your current demand will go up because you know you're going to have the money to pay off that credit card in the future. And it works in the opposite direction as well. If you expect your future income to decrease, like if you get laid off from work and they give you your 2 weeks notice saying, hey, in 2 weeks we got to let you go and you're not going to have any money coming in, then you're not going to wait 2 weeks before you start saving money or buying less. You're probably going to start buying less immediately in order to start saving money and prepare for that future. Right, so again, at least when we're talking about normal goods, If you expect your future income to increase, your current demand will increase. If you expect your future income to decrease, then your current demand will decrease. And so our fifth and final shifter is a change in consumer tastes and preferences. So consumer tastes and preferences just refers to how popular something is, or again, how much consumers might prefer it at any point in time. So this one's really easy to understand. Basically, as consumer tastes and preferences, which doesn't abbreviate consumer TMP, as consumer tastes and preferences increases, or as something becomes more popular, as you might imagine, the demand for it tends to increase as well. And if something decreases in popularity, then demand for it will decrease as well. So I can't think of a more relevant example than what's going on in today's social distancing world, where we're still dealing with this coronavirus pandemic. So what do you think happened to the demand for plastic gloves and face masks during the coronavirus pandemic? Well, as you can imagine, those things have become far more popular to obtain and use now than they were before this outbreak. And so as the consumers prefer to walk around wearing these face masks and these plastic gloves, the demand for these items has increased drastically. If we ever make it out of this whole coronavirus pandemic to where people don't feel the need to walk around with plastic gloves and face masks anymore, then demand for these things would decrease drastically. So again, consumer tastes and preferences are pretty easy to get. If people during a time when people prefer something more, demand goes up. During a time when people might prefer something less, demand would go down. Now, if you're following along with your textbook or if you're paying attention to the book PowerPoint slides, they list a sixth one, and that is change in demographics. So basically, if you have, say, an older population, then things that older people prefer, like medical care or Viagra, the demand for those things tends to increase. If you have more of a younger population, then things that young people tend to prefer, like blue jeans or skateboards, right, demand for those things tends to increase. Right, so the reason why I don't list that one as a separate one is because to me that just kind of falls into consumer tastes and preferences. Of course, if you have an older population, then the demand for things that old people prefer will tend to increase. If you have a younger population, the demand for things that younger people tend to prefer will increase. Right, so again, to me that just kind of falls into the consumer tastes and preferences category. So I don't really list that one as separately. But those are the 5 shifters of demand. Now, I'm never going to ask you which one is 1B or which one is 3A, but be sure to be able to tell me what happens to the demand for a normal good when your income increases, or what happens to the demand for a substitute good when the price of a substitute decreases. So be able to answer questions like that. So let's go through an example of a question that you might see when it comes to this shifting of demand. It says, which of the following is most likely to shift the demand curve for electricity, which I'm going to define for you as a normal good, to the left? So before you answer this question, remember that we're talking about shifting the demand curve to the left. What we're really talking about is a decrease in demand. So if you want to go ahead and pause your computer, take a few seconds to see if you can answer this question, go ahead. Go ahead and pause now. But for the rest of us, let's go ahead and keep going. So again, which of the following is most likely to cause the demand curve for electricity to shift to the left? Or again, which of the following is going to cause the demand curve for electricity to decrease? So let's go through these choices. Let's go ahead and start here at the end. It says an increase in the price of natural gas, a substitute source of energy. So that is answer choice D. So if we have an increase in the price of natural gas, that means people will use natural gas less, and that means that they'll use energy or electricity more. So that will increase the demand for electricity. That's a shift to the right. We're asking which one shifts the curve to the left, so we know it's not D. Let's take a look at C, a decrease in the price of electricity. Well, a decrease in the price of electricity will cause people to want to use electricity more, but that's not a change in demand because it's the current price of electricity that's changing. So that would be an increase in the quantity demanded for electricity. I'm asking you which one is causing the demand for electricity to decrease, so it is not C. An increase in income, well, if people have more money, then their demand for normal goods tends to go up. So again, this is going to cause demand to go up. I'm asking you which one makes demand go down, so we know it's not B. And so we got A, as consumers become more energy conscious, that means that they're going to be more conscious about how much energy they're using and therefore going to want to use less. then that's something that's going to cause the demand to go down or shift to the left, which is what we're looking for. So A is the answer on this particular question. So again, as you get a question like this, it might make sense to kind of go through the answer choices and see which one makes the most sense. Remember that if it's a change in the current price of the good itself, that is quantity demanded, not demand. So make sure you understand that difference moving forward. And that is it for part 1 of chapter 3. We covered everything that I want you to know about demand for this class for now. When you come back for part 2, we're going to shift gears and talk about supply. We'll also get into elasticity at the end of that video. And then part 3, we'll put these together, create a market equilibrium, and talk about how to shift curves in that market equilibrium. That's it for now. As always, please let me know if you have any questions or if you need anything. Hope you enjoyed part 1. And hope to see you all again for part 2. Until then, again, feel free to email me or come to those office hours if you need anything. Again, stay safe and healthy. Take care.